All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to UA Coffee Talk. Given changes in the mobile user acquisition space, creatives have become increasingly important to drive competitive advantage. And so to speak with us about their methodology on doing creatives testing, we have with us today a few folks from Traplight, Akseli Virtanen, Elina Uotinen, and Filippo DeRose. Who will be presenting, actually the first time we have kind of a presentation in this podcast, but presenting how they actually conducted a creatives test. And also with us today is Jon Lau from Scopelly to also ask some questions and to give a little bit of feedback on what they've been doing. But maybe we could start, Elina and Akseli, if you guys could tell us a little bit about yourself. And Filippo, I mean, you've been on this podcast a bunch of times before, but you can go ahead and introduce yourself as well, but go for it. Maybe starting with you, Elina?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name is Elina Uotinen. And yeah, I'm working as a UA analyst at Traplight. And been here for a year, pretty much exactly a year. So yeah, this is the type of stuff that I do there that I'm really excited to show with you as well. Like what kind of insights did we find with this study? So yeah.
Akseli?
Hi, I'm Akseli. I'm the lead marketing artist at Traplight Games, and I've been with the company about 1.5 years now. And for a little bit over a year, we have been working on the current live title, Battle Legion.
All right. Go ahead, Filippo.
Filippo, hello. Chief Growth, but really just make sure that Elina and Akseli are happy people and they feel immensely gratified for doing all this really cool stuff that they're presenting.
Okay, great. Well, Akseli and Elina, go take it away. It'd be great to see what you guys have done at Traplight. And this is for Battle Legion, right? For that game?
That's right, yeah.
Great.
So we set out to understand the impact of creative duration in the performance of our marketing. And indeed, we are working with Battle Legion at the moment. It's a mid-core free-to-play mass battle title on Android and iOS. And our core audience is around 25 to 45-year-old males. And here are some of our key geos, the usual suspects. So, a little bit of background. In this ever-changing landscape with creatives slowly taking the lead role in performance marketing, tracking is going down, automation taking over with various levels of success. We really wanted to understand creative performance in a very specifically and deeply regarding the duration. So we developed a modular creative production pipeline in order to do comparable creatives. And we wanted to understand the role of duration and resolution in different placements. And of course, discover how creatives can be used to influence ad placements. So we created a total of 64 different creatives in 4 different aspect ratios and 16 different durations. And here is an example of the shortest 7.5 second creative. It has the standard beginning of 5 seconds and the standard ending of 2.5 seconds. And they together form the shortest version. And we did them up to 45 seconds of length. And we always added a 2.5 second content block between the standard and standard beginning and ending to form the next length. And all the way up to 45 seconds when it already involves plenty of different value propositions. And as we know that people watch videos on average pretty short time, we think that the amount of value propositions didn't really impact the outcome that much. And we will go to the details with Elina a little bit later. So the campaign setup, we ran all of these creatives on automatic placements across all of Facebook inventory. It took about 3 months. We gathered almost 3 million impressions. 3.6k downloads, and the total spend was 44k. So you can briefly calculate our cost per install if you wish. I'm not gonna say it out loud. And test ran in the audience of male 25 plus worldwide on Android only, with a value-based lookalike 1% from our previous learnings, with value optimization, and in an A/B testing setup, 5 creatives at a time. So we ran like a multiple of tests back to back. And with the high level results, these studies revealed some interesting new stuff, but also confirmed our previous learnings that we have been able to identify just looking at our legacy data set. So with this, we focused on share of spend, IPM, and watch time among ad placements across different resolutions, durations and resolutions. And from here, I will give it to Elina for some more detailed results. Any questions at this point?
Sure. Akseli, maybe I could ask a few questions. So like, in terms of like the rationale behind testing the duration and aspect ratio specifically, what was kind of like the motivation behind testing these two specific aspect of creatives, and what are some other things that you could have tested?
Well, of course, you could test every aspect of the creatives in detail. That's given. But as I was hinting earlier, we saw some interesting grouping of data in our legacy data set that Elina was looking at.
Yeah.
And we saw that some durations were outperforming some Facebook's so-called best practice durations in certain placements and therefore aspect ratios. So we then thought that there is some learnings to be done with this specifically, and went for it. So that was
Got it. So this kind of came from Elina seeing something in the data, and then based upon that, you had a hypothesis that, hey, maybe if we actually try to test more the kind of duration variation because of what you saw in the data, that maybe you could drive higher performance, for example. And then...
Yeah, that...
Oh,
sorry.
Elina.
That's exactly it. And what happened was, of course, the data that I was looking at was really messy because it had a very large scale of different creative concepts. So it wasn't really comparable. So that's why we really wanted to make this test. So the only thing that we're looking at is duration and resolution, so we can get some clear data. So that's the background.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in terms of testing, I noted that you guys did value optimization on the Android side. We don't have that on the Apple side anymore. But is there, like, how do you guys think about these creatives on the Apple side? Do you think that testing on Android, you could use like the similar effects of what you're seeing on Android would then replicate on the Android or on the Apple side as well?
Well, for our product, precisely, we see that the performance is pretty comparable between the platforms, or like we saw before the changes happened. And of course, like these specific results, they really like originate from the user behavior level. That the user like faces these creatives in a certain place in the Facebook like platform. There are certain limitations regarding skippability, etc. And these are all shared across the platforms.
Okay.
So I think these are like pretty comparable.
Yeah. Okay. So talking about our results at a very high level still, I want to take a look at IPM at first. So it was chosen as one of the key components of the analysis, as was mentioned previously. And this graph shows how our IPMs changed by each of our durations in all of our 4 resolutions. So that's what the lines represent. And we can see here that IPM increased as the video duration grew in all of the 4 resolutions that we tested. And but this is, of course, looking at all of the placements combined. So looking a little bit deeper, we could see that the IPM actually varied very heavily between ad placements. So next I want to talk about ad placements. So yeah, This is a look into how our spend was divided in the test based on the different placements. So this is of course looking at all of the resolutions combined, and here we can see that our top 3 placements were audience network rewarded video, Facebook feed, and Facebook in-stream video. This is very much aligned with what we see in our regular campaigns as well. But looking at each of the resolutions in more detail, looking at the data in more detail, in the next slide here we can see that there are some differences. So for example, I've chosen a few highlights here to show you, and for example, we can see that the 4:5 format, or also called the Instagram format, had the smallest share of spend going to audience network out of all the resolutions that we tested, but it was the best for Facebook feed. And these differences are explained very easily by just how much of the screen does the ad cover, and just how natural it is for the viewer. And that's also what explains how the portrait resolution got the largest share of spend going into Instagram stories. Again, very easily explained by the nature of the format, because it covers the whole screen in Instagram stories, and that's why it was the best format for that. And we didn't really see much spend on Instagram other than the portrait format. For landscape here, we can see that audience network really dominated the share of spend, and that's because it's really the only placement where landscape is suitable or where it's optimized for this placement. So it actually attracted over 60% of the spend of the entire landscape format. Okay, so looking at how the share of cost was different in each placement, here we can see how the video duration affected that share of spend. So looking at the square format here, we can see in the graph that the share of spend that went to audience network grew as the video duration grew. So similar trend to the IPMs. That's what I'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, here we can see that especially like longer videos were much stronger on audience network, and for Facebook feed we could see the opposite trend, where shorter videos got a lot more spend, and longer videos did not get much spend on Facebook feed at all. And then in terms of our third biggest placement in the test, Facebook in-stream video, we can see that its share peaked at around 15 seconds or 17.5 seconds. And this is because, again, the nature of the placement. Facebook in-stream video is a mid-roll ad, and it's unskippable until the 15 seconds. So clearly we can see that that is what the algorithm is optimizing for. And after that, as video duration grew, that doesn't get much spend anymore. So for comparison, we can look at the landscape format. So here we can see the difference in the share of spend. So audience network really dominated here. We can see that the share of spend that went to it grew really quickly. And we can still see the similar trend with Facebook feed, that shorter videos got a lot more spend, and the same trend for Facebook in-stream video as well, where it peaked at around 15 seconds. So overall, like, we could see the similar trends based on each resolution, but there were individual differences, and we could also identify some thresholds for where we could clearly see that there's a rule in the algorithm that, oh, this resolution in this duration no longer gets spent at this placement. So it was interesting to find out these little data points. But yeah, we can talk about the next topic. And IPM, which is what I already talked about previously, we could notice that IPM grew as video duration grew. But actually, looking at it in more detail, we could only see this in one placement in audience network, actually. So we're wondering, so why is that? And this would be because this is, first of all, the longest unskippable placement at 30 seconds, and after that, the user can close it. But also, viewing the ad is voluntary because you want it to get a reward. So what this means is that most people who actually watched the ad, they actually stayed for most of the ad. What this leads us to thinking is that longer you have to watch, the more likely you are to install. And the reason I say have to watch is because it's a really big difference in if the ad is voluntary viewing or if it's unskippable. Because if it's voluntary viewing, people only watch around the 1 or 2 or 3 seconds. So that's really why Audience Network is the only placement where we can see these increasing IPMs, because it's the only network where people really watch. So yeah.
Quick question.
And for comparison, sorry?
So if I'm looking
Yeah.
at the landscape line, the yellow line, skip the ability to skip starts at 30 seconds, and that's probably where we see that drop off,
Yeah.
right? Around like 32, when they realize they can skip, and then interestingly enough, your IPM starts to recover and go back up for those who actually end up watching this for the full length of the video. I'm assuming that it then yields for a much higher intent user by that point.
Yeah, that's an interesting finding. And next, I can show you a little bit about our watch time. We could see that actually quite a large portion of people actually stayed for the entire ad, even if it was over 30 seconds and they could have closed it. That was a good question. But yeah, in the next slide, we can see a comparison of the IPMs in the different placements. So our top 3 placements, and Audience Network is the only one where we can see the increasing IPMs. So the IPMs remain pretty stable throughout all of the durations on both Facebook feed and Facebook in-stream video. And this is, of course, due to watch time. So looking at watch time, we can really see what happens here. So in this graph, I have put the average watch time by placement in seconds. So the gray line is the actual video duration, and then the other lines represent the average watch time in each placement. So I think, for example, the voluntary viewing placements, so what we have like Facebook feed and other feed type placements, we can see that the average watch time is only around 1 to 3 seconds. And it's very different from, for example, Audience Network, where we can see that the average watch time follows the video duration really closely until the 30-second mark, where people start to drop. Yeah, the outlier here is the Facebook in-stream video, which we can here see that the average watch time for it is around 8 seconds out of the 15 second, which is the unskippable amount. So a lot of people leave before the unskippable ad even ends. And another way to look at it and see exactly where people start to drop is the share of completed views in this next graph. Here we can see that, for example, for Audience Network, in the blue line, we can see that 90% of viewers watched the full ad on Audience Network if it was under 30 seconds. But after that, the share starts to drop pretty heavily. But still, even if our ad was the longest, which was 45 seconds, still 25% of people watched the full thing, which is significantly higher than in any other placement. That was interesting to notice. So yeah, for comparison, you can really see that basically all other placements, the line is at the very bottom, meaning that very few or no people watch the full ad. And we can see that for the Facebook in-stream video, that after 15 seconds is when the unskippable video ends, people also leave. Important thing to remember here is, of course, that watch time doesn't directly lead to profit. We're not optimizing our campaigns based on watch time either, because a user can watch the full video and still not be interested, or then we can get a really valuable user by only watching like a few seconds. So that's not like one of the KPIs we were looking for here, but watch time is able to tell us about the background for some of the other KPIs, for example, that I showed previously with the IPM and how that contributes to watch time as well. Yeah, then moving on from watch time, I've compiled some of our main findings here, really summarized all of the main points into the 3 main findings. So first of all, this study gave us some insight into Facebook algorithms' mysterious secrets. So as I was saying, we detected some thresholds for spend on ad placements based on resolution and duration. And I could say an example of this is that we noticed that the 4 to 5 format, the Instagram format, gets like no spend at all on audience network or very little spend until 30 seconds. And after that, it starts to get a lot of spend on audience network. So it was a really clear indicator of like a threshold in the algorithm of how the spend is distributed. And that's just an example of some of the stuff we found out. And secondly, which is probably the most important finding for us as a company, is our preferred placements and durations. So we found these ideal sweet spots of combinations of duration, resolution, and placement. And these can be used in our creative production and campaign management. And thirdly, what I want to bring up is we got some detailed data on ad viewing behavior that we haven't really looked at before at this level of detail. So finding out that watch time is not dependent on resolution at all, but also it was interesting to find out exactly the extent to which it's dependent on the placements and how that can contribute to performance. So what can we do with these findings? What can we learn? So I've compiled like top three things how we can use these learnings for. First of all, I want to go back to the creative modularity that Akseli was talking about. This new modular creative production system that we developed, it really helps us to improve our speed of things. It really allows for quick iterations and overall just expedite the creative production process greatly. But also learning about the Facebook algorithm secrets and how it was influenced by our duration and resolution testing. We can really use this data to leverage Facebook manual placements in the future, but also steer and manipulate automated campaigns with the help of creative production. So this is really the top 3 findings summarized. So yeah, if you have any questions, then shoot
Great.
them my
so,
way.
Elina, I actually have a few questions. Could you dive a little bit deeper into the creative modularity system that you guys have? Like, how does that work, and what are if you can dive a little bit deeper into like the benefits of that?
Yeah, I think Akseli is the
Okay,
better one to
Akseli?
reply to this one. I think he can explain.
Yeah, sure. So that was what I was like in the beginning of this presentation showing briefly. And here we have on the screen these modules. So we have these standard beginnings and endings, which are just a single already rendered out couple of second long video files. And then we have a bunch of different so-called content blocks. And these are also already rendered in. The sound transitions, fades are rendered in, and there is also a fade in opacity transition rendered in. So these are extremely easy to use. You just drop them into the timeline, shuffle them around, and export.
Got it. So basically, if I'm understanding you correctly, the way that you've developed your content video is to create specific sections, and then you modify the duration of the video just by picking specific sections to include, and then you can remove sections to make it shorter, add more sections to make it longer. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. And Elina, maybe another question I have for both of you is that, so you had a number in terms of some of the graphs and some of the data that you collected around, some of the front end metrics like IPM, and wondering, still on the Android side, whether you looked at more downstream metrics and whether you saw any differences relative to the front end versus the back end metrics.
Yeah, definitely. We took a look at all of the regular KPIs we also look at in our regular campaigns. So, of course, ROAS has a important role in that, but also UpDAO. And we actually even looked at retention based on this, but found no significant differences there. But we used all the other KPIs, even the later funnel KPIs, to really determine our best durations and resolutions. And that's really the part that you really don't see in the presentation. But we created another like entire table for that about our other like best durations and best resolutions. So for that analysis, all of the other KPIs really mattered as well. Of course, profit is
I have a
important.
question about how you guys intend to use this moving forward. As we all know, like the UA ecosystem is like getting more and more privacy focused, and so getting a creative level reporting is largely gone depending on what type of optimization you're using. For Facebook specifically, if you guys are, let's say, trying to tailor your creative mix based on what you believe historically performs, you may or may not be able to actually get that reporting post-install data. So how will that impact your ability to use this kind of methodology moving forward?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. It definitely is just the one sad truth about our field is that things are changing so fast, and things that were still great a month ago may already be changed. So that's just always something to keep in mind. But I think just comparing the data we got from this test with the data we got from the previous analysis looking at our legacy data, we could see a lot of similarities. So we believe there are some like truth to this that will stand the test of time. But still, of course, things are changing, and it's more difficult with the loss of visibility.
To summarize, my understanding of what you guys are saying is that you guys will continue to run this based on your confidence, based on legacy or historical data, to a certain point, right? Like, but for the time being, you will continue to leverage kind of your past data to dictate how you guys will actually influence the creative mix. For example, if you were to run like a AAA campaign, you might not have that visibility. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's true, and I think the findings from this study, especially, we're going to be using in the near future. But also, this allows us, especially the creative modular system, allows us to really test more concepts, like even faster than before, and we can test like different beginnings for our creatives and stuff like that. So it's the testing is ongoing. It's not like now we found out everything about our creatives right now and this is the truth. No, it's still, of course, it's ongoing. But
John, maybe I could ask you, like, what would you recommend in terms of like, as you know, we get less tracking capability. Do you focus more on front end metrics, or maybe do you try and with your non-lat traffic just kind of assume like based upon a cohorted day that that's kind of like, and if I guess you'd have to run, you know, you might have to run your campaigns kind of serially or one at a time or something, and then try to estimate what the downstream stuff is, or like what would you recommend?
Can I just quickly chime in before John? I'd love to hear John as well. So what we've learned sort of from a more distant perspective, high level perspective, is also from like previous experiences with other games. There seems to be a truth in the fact that the more core the audience, the more core the product being advertised, the more consistent the behavior is on a channel like Facebook or even UAC between the two platforms. So there is, that's a bit like what Akseli was saying before, right? That there's actually more difference in behavior of the users between platforms the more casual the game is. So we have an advantage because obviously with Traplight we focus on mid-core for a certain kind of audience. Yeah. So we're able to kind of bank on legacy knowledge more, unless of course we're treating a new channel, let's say for example TikTok, that's a whole different user interaction. But we're collecting as much data as we can with this kind of experimentation to sort of gain the confidence and infer that, you know, even as Facebook privacy evolves or other aspects like IDFA, etc., we are sort of inferring that, you know, things will sort of stay the course. Unless, of course, we suddenly see the performance crippled and tanking, then obviously something has changed. But we've seen a certain consistency, right? Which is ultimately, in the first set of data that Elina was observing, oh look, there's a pattern here. Let's just check that this pattern actually does exist. And we went a little bit more deep dive with this work to validate that there is a pattern. So it's kind of, I guess sort of saving the coins for the rainy days of further privacy changes that will also happen on Google, etc. And again, I think it's more of a function of the product and what is being advertised to what audience, more than giving us that confidence to also go into AAA and use certain kind of durations and formats.
Yeah, I think this is very smart what you guys are doing, because you guys are utilizing the fact that you guys can still access custom audiences to benchmark. And I think that's great, because as Filippo said, like in the near future, like as things get more privacy implementation, where it might potentially remove the ability for you to target custom audiences, or say the cost of running custom audiences are going to be increasingly more expensive, as we are already seeing when people run 1% LAL, purchasers, so on and so forth. You might have to be at the point where you're relying on creatives and creative themes and durations and orientations to do the targeting for you, right? So what I find interesting about what you guys did is that since you guys ran this experiment, you now have benchmark data. So let's say in the future where you can do certain levels of targeting even on Android, you can say, okay, I know that my audience will respond to certain types of themes, certain type durations, and you're going to utilize that to dictate who will get ad exposure, because the algorithm will always optimize for either engagement or IPM or conversion events, right? AAA, you could still run conversion events. So I think this is very intelligent what you guys are doing, and hopefully when you guys are thinking about, like, when you guys are running, let's say, a scan campaign, or when you guys are running when Android, becomes more private, you guys can actually take these learnings and apply them. Assume that's what you guys are doing.
Yes, that is 100% spot on, and it kind of connects the dots and echoes a discussion we had a while ago with Mr. Joe Kim about, like, potential impacts of IDFA changes before it even happened. The creative is the ultimate entity that we control. Less and less everything else, right? But how can we control it? That's the question, right? Aside from obviously varying colors and things like that, are there more intelligent ways of learning how to manipulate creative to the best of our performance, basically? So that's what's really important to understand. Okay, like, we have control over duration. Let's learn more about durations. We have control on, like, sizes and shapes. Let's learn more about those specifically. So it kind of ties in with the high-level strategy of, okay, we can only control our destiny with creative. Now, how do we go about that? Because indeed, the original sort of hypothesis is, it looks like we're headed for a world where ultimately creative will be filtering your audience. And I went as far as saying, actually, potentially, maybe in the future, due to how restrictive things are, that the more sort of eye-catching, loud creatives, which generate a lot of attention and get a lot of installs, might not be ideal anymore in the future, because you can't target those. And so all you're getting is just masses of volume, but not necessarily the kind of quality that you need to perform. So there might be a change also in how, there is the whole topic of fake ads. But we won't have them anymore in the future, because you have to really filter your audience by using a good creative strategy.
Right. And maybe one other question I have is, Elina and Akseli, when you think about the specific kind of content, do you think that because the way, like the approach and kind of the assumption here is that you've got these different content blocks that you can kind of put in and modify stuff, but do you think that based upon a different theme or different kind of content, that you could expect these kind of results around duration and placement to be kind of uniform? And then the one kind of content I do worry about a little bit that may not fit this model would be something that's more narrative driven. So like, like some of these creatives that have become viral, like, oh, am I pregnant? Or, but there's like a storyline behind you up to the point about, wondering whether you're pregnant or not. But like, I don't know, what are your thoughts in terms of the content impact on some of these results?
Well, we saw some, like Elina was explaining, on some similar results compared to our legacy dataset, which includes like tons of different ad ideas and concepts, and by just that, we're able to prove that there is some like a universal truthness to the results, basically. But like to your next point, you are exactly right that this kind of production methodology doesn't apply to all types of ad videos, especially the like narrative driven or like your a little bit fancier, more expensive trailers or so cannot be produced this way. But this is what kind of like sets the foundation,
Right.
and is the bread and butter to the UA activity in a sense.
Right.
So
And maybe, right. And Akseli, maybe to your point, one of the things you could potentially do is to start with this kind of approach to kind of see what the optimal content duration is and kind of format and placement. And then based upon that, then you could say, okay, actually, if this is the optimal duration and placement, like landscape on whatever, then you create your narrative driven content against that optimization, for example. So it could kind of be a two-step process potentially.
Yeah, precisely. We identified those sweet spots and are now already almost exclusively using those learnings, and I see positive results from that.
So I
Awesome.
wonder how this will actually change the way you guys approach how you guys tap in different sources of inventory. So using Facebook as an example, majority of advertisers are getting their inventory on certain placements, right? So we're talking primarily IG feed, news feed, and audience network will probably make up like close to 60-70% of most advertisers' inventory. Now, when you're thinking about how you're doing this modulation on the creative side, are you guys giving thought on like, okay, maybe this can open the door for me to tap into other forms of inventory that I historically hasn't really bought a lot from, but maybe if I create the right ad for the right placement, I can actually get the results that I'm looking for?
Yeah, that's a pretty good point, and definitely like this can be used to find such a new placements, or like start going deeper to some placements that where we didn't attract much spend with this test, by just ruling out these. That we know that this creative now works for Instagram. Like stories, for example, we can rule out that it probably doesn't work in Messenger. So the other way around, then we can rule out like the vertical aspect ratio and go for all new ideas. So yeah, it is a process and a long one.
Are you guys considering running similar tests on other platforms such as like on UAC or app campaigns?
Yeah, I actually before we ran this test, when I took a look at our legacy data, I did it both on Facebook and UAC. So there is some bit of background already for the Google Ads test, but we haven't run a test this extensive there yet. But I think that's something that we definitely should do. I think actually Google Ads is our best network at the moment. So there's really definitely good reasons for us to investigate this there as well. Because of course the same creative doesn't work on Facebook, and there it's very different. And that is something that we want to test in the future. And that's a great point you bring up.
Just to echo Elina and answer your question, John, and the previous question as well, it is giving us numbers and data to kind of reprioritize activities on testing more video ad networks in a certain way, which we had kind of postponed, but we are definitely kind of reprioritizing it and testing on those as well as soon as we have bandwidth, because it's given us enough reason.
Okay. So I just have one last question. If you guys, Elina and Akseli, if you were to go back and rerun this test, is there anything you would have changed, or basically, is this the way you would approach it again?
Well, from my side, I think we did a pretty good job for the resources that we have at hand, and I don't see much places where to improve at least on the creative side. Like, of course, like now knowing with a bit of longer cohorts, we might have considered Google first. But of course, Facebook is a great option. There's so much inventory available that I'm very satisfied with this.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think what comes to my mind, of course, I would love to run this test on iOS as well, but at the moment that's not really useful, let's say, because we really need the visibility. We want to get those later funnel metrics that just aren't possible for iOS anymore. So that's unfortunately something that we weren't able to do, but ideally we would want to test this on iOS as well, even though we have noticed that our creatives work quite similarly on Android and iOS, but still this is something that I would like to test, but yeah, at the moment not possible. Maybe not ever, but we shall see.
We are testing an incrementality tool, and perhaps we will consider expanding the use of it for this purpose as well, because we seem to be getting some pretty good insights from, looking at iOS more as just an incremental mechanism.
I guess
Can't talk about which tool we're using though. That would be promotion.
Okay, one last question for me then is, you ran this test on Android. How would this, or does it, impact the way you approach iOS in its new ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose not much. Like we see and we believe that these results are very useful for iOS as well. So we have rolled out some of the learnings to our iOS facing campaigns in terms of the creative duration, for example, and are seeing like good results. But then if we would run the test, of course, fully again on iOS side, we would need to then just rely on the very early metrics. Like click-through rate is something pretty telling for creatives, IPM, and then compare that to this data set and see what is what.
Okay, great. Well, I think those are all the questions, right? So definitely Traplight, Filippo, Elina, Akseli, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your results. Filippo, if you guys run any more tests, let us know. It'd be great to have you guys back on. And with that, for the audience, we'll catch you next time. And again, thanks so much for sharing your results. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I vote that next time. Thank you.